you've had a mini break, here we go. So, yeah, Alan and I go back 15 years. I think that Alan is going to introduce himself as the volunteer office manager of Broadwater Warren, which doesn't even begin to touch the surface of what Alan does. One of the things he's now an expert at is dormice. And I did like this interview that you did on the website for the People's Trust for Endangered Species, which includes the fact that a large male dormouse gave Alan the most serious... This is dangerous business, this conservation. We did find a photo of this dormouse that attacked you. Not so cute now, are they? No. Now, Alan, in his former career, worked for His Majesty's government, and that's all I can tell you. I know what he did, and if your mind is going down the kind of Judy Dent 007 kind of route, you're in the right kind of ballpark, but we can't talk about it. But when you see Alan, you will notice something that I think is quite striking. It's uncanny, isn't it? And one of the bits of work that Alan and I did at Broadwater, I can't claim credit for this whatsoever, but Alan helped put in the pool in the middle of Broadwater Warren, which has been such a bonus for wildlife. And Alan is so hands-on that we had to get into that pool in order to create it. And we've got the photo as Alan emerges from the pool. Ladies in the audience, I'd just like to explain all us men are like that. So to find out about the first 20 years of Broadwater Warren, a place that SOS has had so much involvement with, over to Alan.
Everybody hear me okay? This is the final talk, so I hope you can stay awake long enough for me to finish it. That extract from the PTES bulletin said that Broadwater was in Kent. Did we notice that? It isn't. RSPB continue to insist it's in Kent. If you look on their website, it's not. It's definitely in Sussex. It was very appropriate for Adrian to introduce me, actually, because my first ever visit to Broadwater Warren was in 2007, when they just acquired it, and he was one of the first people I met at the reserve. This is the new sign we have up there now, and this is where it is. You see that, that little mark there? You can see the Kent border with Sussex is here. We're right up in the northeast corner, just south of Tunbridge Wells. It's, if you look on an Ordnance Survey map, maybe not the most recent ones, but some of the older ones, you'll see that it says this, which is, you can see it's covered in conifer plantation. And just a bit further down here, this is Broadwater, and this bit is Berridge Rocks, Sussex Wildlife Trust. So they join each other. The history of the reserve goes back longer than my involvement. I started I'm a volunteer, not a member of staff. I'm a volunteer and I started in 2007. I am the office manager. It sounds very grand, but it isn't. I'm a species surveyor and I also do work parties. And I've been doing that for 16 years now. In the 1990s, East Sussex County Council were proposing Broadwater, as it was, to be a landfill site. And a very organised group of residents, local people, got together and tried to fight this. And they did a very good job. Subsequently, the RSPB got involved when it recognised that this was a good site for a heathland and woodland restoration project. And in 2007, the RSPB bought the land. It's 450 acres, 185 hectares if you prefer metric. And it was bought for about $1 million, mainly through lottery funding and grantscape funding. And you'll see here something from the local newspaper where Martin Allison, the area manager of the day, suggested that heathland restoration would take about 10 years. Yeah, possibly. I think it's heathland restoration and management takes forever. Adrian is stuck again. Broadwater is a remnant of water-down forest, which was one of the old hunting forests of the High Weald back in medieval days. There was there was water-down forest, there was ash-down forest, St Leonard's and Worth. Water-down forest, according to the Saxon Chronicle of the 9th century, was 130 miles east to west and 60 miles north to south. A massive forest. Forest meaning, as you probably know in those days, an open area managed for hunting with pockets of woodland. And they were managed and remained open through the work of peasants mainly, who were grazing their livestock, harvesting the timber from the site, birch. They would take heather and bracken for roofing, for bedding. Bracken was used for fertilizer as well. So they maintained the openness of the land, specifically so that the king or the count or the medieval knights of the day could hunt on it. Back in the 1800s, this is what was left of the heathland in that part of this part of the world. You can see the larger part is ashdown forest, and the remnants of water-down forest are still up here. Gradually, over time, the lowland heath is fragmented through agriculture, housing being built on, forested, and slowly fragmented over the years. Today, that's pretty much what it looks like. And that little triangle south of Tunbridge Wells is Broadwater Warren. In the 20th century, we have this painting from Tunbridge Wells Museum, which shows Broadwater Forest as a typically open landscape with these pockets of trees in it. The reserve is part of the Weald reserves. We manage 5 reserves from the office. They're in Kent, West Sussex and East Sussex. And we have the ground number of staff of 2 managing 5 reserves, but ably supported by about 110 volunteers, with the largest group being at Broadwater. When I started, I was the volunteer coordinator, and we had about 20 volunteers at the time, I think. It's now grown a lot, and I've recently handed over the volunteer coordinator to somebody else. Thank goodness. And there's some of the crew. The heathland restoration project really didn't begin until 2010, although the reserve was acquired in 2007. We went through an environmental impact assessment and all sorts of procedures before we could actually start. The heathland started to be restored in 2010, so it's not actually that long ago. This is what it looked like, very densely planted conifer, clearly for harvesting and for commercial purposes, but very little growing underneath. Very dense, partly mature timber, and then the large areas of immature conifer like this, totally impenetrable. Adrian was here on this day when I think it was ITV came to film the start of the process of restoring the heath. The initial plan was that the heathland would be the main, we'd concentrate on the heathland to start with, and then there was some fairly extensive woodland as well, but that might come a bit later. The contractors who were employed at that time brought this thing. It was completely useless. As you can see, it's trying to fill, it's shredding up stuff and trying to fill that little yellow trailer with chip. It didn't work very well. So later in the year, well, that's what it did. It went through the conifer like this. Later in the year, we brought that big boy in, and that made a real difference. You can see that one going, even that one struggled a bit with some of it. And there were larger areas like this, where even that machine wouldn't work. So they got 3 blokes with chainsaws who worked their way through this conifer, tree by tree by tree. There is the mature timber, contractors came in with these forest harvesters and took them down. If you've ever seen one of these working, it's amazing. There's computer control, but the operator on board is really highly skilled. So this is what it was starting to look like, a bit of a mess. But the timber all went off for various things like construction, fencing, etc. But we had all these tops. They couldn't stay on site, of course, so they were shredded. But that chip was pretty low grade, and there wasn't a boiler around here, a biomass boiler would take anything like this. Fortunately, Eddie came to our rescue, and Eddie was bringing down bags of compost and fertilizers down to the south, and taking these chip loads back up to Lancashire to a paper mill, which had a boiler that would take it. As you'll see from this graph, the young conifer in the green was the main job in the early years, with mature timber at much lower levels. But gradually, the young conifer disappeared completely, and then it was the mature conifer that was worked on. So by 2015, we pretty much finished that initial phase of the work. This is what it looked like. Now, if anyone had told me, I'm no expert on heathland restoration, if somebody had told me that that would turn into heathland, I honestly wouldn't believe them. A lot of local people didn't believe either. Again, a bit of a mess. And large areas of just nothing very much. This is, that was about 2010. But slowly, the heather came back, and there was no seeding. This was all heather seeds that were in the ground, dormant, just needed some light to get them to grow again. Oh, we stopped it. No, it's gone again. Remember that picture there? Well, doesn't like me, Adrian. He's going back and forward now. Doesn't like it. There were going to be some before and afters here, but maybe we can't. That's the before. That's now, if anybody knows the reserve, that's the main track down to the reserve from the car park. I could do a song and dance, I suppose. Anybody know any jokes? I'm going to go back a bit. Yeah. So that's... there we go. Well, that's what it used to look like, and that was taken in 2010, I think, if I remember rightly. It's not going to work because that wasn't what I was going to show you. But anyway, this is about 2016, 17. heathland coming back really quite well. Well, somebody else has talked now. Do you want a review of that one? Yeah, that there, Adrian. No, but further, no. Keep going down. About there. Try that. Heathland coming back gradually. And there we are. It's just. And that particular photo just now looks like that. Big change. That one is now that. Taken from the same place. This one, 2010, 2016. So 6 years, the heathland's coming back quite well. This is pretty much what the reserve looks like now. You've got the purple, the heathland, in the west and in the east and the north, and the wet woodland running through the middle. There's some nice wet woodland in the right on either side of the stream. And down in the south, you've got a lot of sweet chestnut coppice and birch coppice and mixed conifer. There's an aerial view of the reserve, and you see those open patches now. I mentioned that the peasants used to manage the heathland, woodland, particularly the heathland. We don't have peasants anymore, do we? The RSPB's got a new name for them. They call them volunteers now. Clearing a heath, to prepare a heath for restoration is pretty easy. Actually managing a heath is much more difficult. A never-ending process. We've got lots of pine seeds still in the ground, and here we are chopping them out. Well, there's a lovely looking guy. That's a tree popper. You can actually lever these trees out. You can cut them, burn them, but they still come back. But more recently, we've started selling birch. We now produce, using this amazing framework, we produce these things, bundles. We're now selling them at £10 each, would you believe? Sussex Wildlife Trust got some. And they're used for riverbank strengthening and leaky ground projects. This year we have currently an order for 400 of these, so that's making us about £4,000 this year. We also pull up a lot of bracken. If anybody's tried that, it's a pretty boring, dull job, but it has to be done. And mimicking some of the work that the peasants would have done, peat cutting, etc., to create these areas of bare ground is pretty important too. Great for regenerating heather. There's certain things like young heather to feed on, invertebrates. Reptiles will bask out on the open land here. Birds will forage out on it. And it also produces a quite effective fire break. So there's quite a bit of sort of bare ground creation going on. There you can see the regen here. We'll come back to the what people thought was the bird hide. Pink. People were asking us when that bird hide was going to open. We had to tell them actually what it was for was something rather different. We'll come on to that. We also do a lot of cutting in the heather now. So the idea is to get you don't have a monoculture that heather's all the same height. You try to get some variation into it. And cutting is quite an effective way of doing it as well. Apparently, the experts tell me that nightjars and birds like that actually like to nest on the edges of heather patches, not in the middle. So the more cutting you can do here, the more edges you're making. The little white spots on here, on that photo, snow, when it was just starting to snow this winter. The peasants, as I said, grazed the land. We have grazing animals on the site now. This is our herd of 4 conic ponies, semi-wild ponies. They do a great job of keeping the milinia, the long grass, or more grass down. But they're not very good on birch, don't seem to like it. So we brought in some of these. Now, David will probably recognise what these are, or most of them. These are Bagot goats. There are actually a few Old English in there, and a Golden Guernsey, all rare breed goats. They've been brought in to try and manage the heath. One of the issues we have is birch. Birch coming back and back. One of the most effective methods we've found in the past is we use something called a clearing saw, which is a brush cutter with a circular saw blade on the end. We cut them with one person cutting and another person following on behind, spot weeding every single birch stump. Spot spraying with herbicide. Of course, we want to try and reduce herbicide use, and we've now got a project underway which is to use these goats to graze off the birch regrowth. And next spring we're hoping to move these guys to another part of the heath. They're in an area at the moment with no public access, but the plan is to move them to the open heath and use a fenceless grazing system to keep them in the reserve. Would be interesting because they're quite interesting animals. These boys, they're all boys, very vigorous, boisterous. But we'll see how that works. SOS are actually helping fund that project, so we'd like to thank you for that. And come along for the entertainment when it starts. Coppicing in the woodland is something that's ongoing now. Birch, you can see here, but we also have a lot of sweet chestnut, and we're cutting sweet chestnut and making our own fence posts, and actually providing fence posts to quite a few other reserves. Very narrow, congested, conifer in many places right alongside. So we're now opening up the rides. Here's a before and after. This ride's now rather nice actually, and that conifer's been cut right back. I mentioned the wet woodland. It's a very nice bit of habitat there. Quite rare, I think, these days, a weald and wet woodland. Lots of nice habitat, iron-rich pools. There are some ponds like this. Actually, this is a new one. We cut this one out 8 years ago. It's rather settled into the landscape rather nicely. Another big issue for us was rhododendron. There was an awful lot of rhododendron on site. The best way to manage rhododendron is to cut it, let it regrow slightly, and then spray it and pray the following year. It's about the only way you can control it. This is what it looks like, and as you probably know, it takes years and years for anything to come back because of the toxins that the rhododendrons released into the soil. This is a bit before and after. Not many people know we have a sandstone quarry in Broadwater, and some nice habitat developing here on these sandy faces of the quarry. A lot of invertebrates starting to come in and using this particular face here. There's a big pond called the decoy pond, which was used for duck shooting many years ago. That was completely empty. But we got that restored, and over time that's developed quite nicely. It's not quite as open as this now. It's got a lot of rushes in it. We're thinking about how we're going to do that. Last year we had some Duke of Edinburgh students came along. We put them in the pond and said, start pulling out the rushes. For 2 days they did it. Did a pretty good job actually. But the pond doesn't look quite like this at the moment, also because the dam broke. And we had to have it repaired. And SOS again kindly funded that repair work. It got to the point where the outflow was eroding the bank badly, and it eventually went. But it's now fully restored. On the heath and in the rest of the reserve, we've been making some ponds. They're all very, very successful. And down here, this is the old shooting range on the site. I'll come back to that. But these wet flushes have produced some really nice habitat, great for dragonflies. And in October, I was working with some volunteers down here, and I flushed up some snipe. And we get quite a lot of snipe using this area now. And that was nice, but up behind them flew a short-eared owl. And we think it's the same owl that had been on Ashdown Forest, where it had been predating snipe. So it's quite likely that owl was the same one actually to come over from Ashdown. And that's what it looks like at the moment. It's really, really nice. Another pond that we built next to the biggest, this is the oldest tree in the reserve. Unfortunately, when the conifer plantation was established, of course, they got rid of all the nice trees. This one is right on the edge of the border with Sussex Wildlife Trust, and just probably escaped the chainsaw back in those days. When you're opening a new reserve, there's all sorts of things you have to do. One is to get people in, so we do have a car park now, with a gate which is solar powered, which is rather nice. Goes wrong all the time, and I'm the only one who knows how it works. Then you also have to get the public access. This is the main track into the reserve when it was opened, first of all. But we've improved that quite a lot. And we've built some viewpoints as well, people to see. It's a nightjar viewpoint. It isn't the best place to see nightjars, though. I know where it is. And one of the big things we did was to put a forest track in. Getting timber out is really important. And we built this track that runs east-west through the reserve. And it's used by Sussex Wildlife Trust and RSPB to get timber out. Through the wet woodland, we wanted people to be able to experience the wet woodland. And so we put in a walkway. I just want to put that up because it's quite fun. The reserve was and has a long history of military use, going back to the 18th century. That's what somebody said to me one day in the car park. And I said, well, can I have a look? And we went over and she said, is that there? And it was a grenade. I said, perhaps not. Yeah, here's a painting from 1780 of watered out forest and a military camp on the forest itself. But the history goes back a long way. There's one or two of the things we found. We've got a very good relationship now with the bomb disposal team. They come and they blow things up for us. That's that shooting range I mentioned to you. That wet flush is running down through here, and at the bottom is what we call the butts. That's where they used to put the targets up. And there are shooting points at every 100 yards down through here. And I have met somebody who has fired on that range. Have we got time to tell you the story about him? Yeah, just. He told me that Groombridge village, which is just down the road where he lived, it's a very small village. It has a stream through the middle, and it's partly in Kent and partly in Sussex. And during the war, they had 3 different Home Guard units who never spoke to each other. They had the Sussex one side of the stream, the Kent on the other side of the stream, and they had a railway station, so they had a railway Home Guard as well. It was just like, I'm sure, like Dad's Army. And then the butts. This is what it looked like in 1944. It had been forested up until the Second World War. We know that. We got photos from the First World War. But it was very open, as you can see, in 44. But after the war, when that the campaign, the government-led campaign to become less dependent on foreign timber was very, very energetic, and so the areas like this were planted up on those poor heathland soils. But at that time, in the 40s, like on Ashdown and others around that part of this part of the world, we did have the Canadian Army driving their tanks around the reserve, and they left this one behind. There's a myth that there's a tank underneath that turret. There isn't. It's just a bit of turret left. We think it was probably used for target practice. One of the things that we all have, sometimes we have a problem with our dogs, especially on heathland sites. We did have a policy of dogs under control. Didn't work, and gradually we've introduced dogs on leads. Dogs on leads all year round. The local paper did its very best to stir things up. I don't know whether Chris got involved in this at the time, but Paul Outhwaite, as some of you may remember, he certainly did. We weathered the storm, and people are generally now pretty good about keeping the dogs on leads. Well, I've told you a lot about what goes into creating a new reserve, and I suppose you're interested a bit in the wildlife, so we'll come on to that now. Nightjars were present on the site. They took advantage of the forestry clearings. As the clearings were done, nightjar moved in. But there were only, I think, about 4 or 5 pairs. Woodlark were absent, but I remember the day when one of our bird surveyors phoned in and said there was some woodlark on the site. It didn't take them long, about 2 or 3 years, I think, before woodlark came back. Woodlark, nightjar. That's a rather nice picture of a woodlark. The ones where I've put photo by, these are all taken by visitors. We've got 2 or 3 photographers who come in and take some great photos. So that one was one by, that's a woodlark by one of them. The other priority species, tree pipit, and Dartford warbler, again taken at Broadwater, and that's a spectacular sight. And that bird has got nest material, it's building a nest. These are our priority heathland birds, and you can see how they're doing. Nightjar doing rather well, that blue line still going up. 14 jeering males this last year. Tree pipit, big disaster. No one's quite sure why, but I think in Sussex generally they're having a really bad time. And we went up to 14 pairs, and now we're down to none last year. No breeding evidence. But the other noticeable graph is the Dartford. You can see we have no Dartfords at all breeding. There used to be the odd one seen coming through. But now we had 12 pairs in 2022. There are no dates. There are no data here for 2020 because of the pandemic. I think they got hit quite badly by the cold weather in December. Was it 22 when we had a lot of snow? And sort of that knocked them back a bit. But we're down to 6 pairs this year. That's not bad from none. Linnets are really common on the site. We get quite a few linnets, so it's nice to see them. You can't really visit Broadwater without seeing a stone chat or two now. And I don't know if you're aware, I'm sure you're all birders, but if we tell people if you're looking for a Dartford warbler, keep an eye on the stone chats, because more often than not, the Dartfords fly around with the stone chats. So you keep your eye on the top of the heather bushes for the stone chat, and a bit further down, keep an eye out for a little black dark bird. That's probably going to be a Dartford. I took a group round recently, and it's exactly what happened. Other birds that we get are occasional crow. The crossbills come in and out. You see them for a while, then they disappear. We had a few end of last year. Siskin and redpoll, quite common. We had a flock of well over 100 redpoll last week on site. I just included this photo because I just think it's brilliant. Last year we had a couple of cuckoos on site for quite a while, actually, and a female spotted as well. So they made well of fun. Laid eggs in nests on site last year. We do get the occasional kingfisher on the pond, mainly in the later part of the year when young birds are dispersing. But that was taken at the pond a few years ago. Grey whitetail bred at our decoy pond, but we're pretty sure that they don't now because the mink got them, and we're definitely mink about. I saw one a couple of weeks ago. Spotted flycatcher, yes, breed most years in small numbers. We tried to encourage them by putting out some boxes not a few years ago, and it was an instant success. One that was nesting within about a couple of months of the box being put up. Unfortunately, it wasn't a happy ending. It got predated, probably by woodpecker. Marsh tip, we do quite well for marsh tip. I think it was about 2014 where we had the best breeding evidence in Sussex for marsh tip because they were breeding in my dormouse boxes. And so it wasn't that difficult to find them. Lesser spot. I think Ken Smith's here, isn't he? Somewhere? Yeah, he's back there. Definitely breeding at Broadwater. 2015 it was, Ken, when we had a nest and Ken came along and using an endoscopic camera or video camera, I think there were 3 chicks in that nest and all 3 fledged shortly after. We found a nest in 2022 and observed it. In 2021, and definitely two chicks in it being fed. 2022, the cheeky devils moved across the Sussex Wildlife Trust, just across the track, and we went over and got the nest and took it back. We did. But they bred over I think they bred over there on 2022. 2023, I don't recall any evidence of breeding, but they were seen on site. Woodcock, probably in 1 or 2 pairs breeding, but quite a lot of woodcock in the winter, in the wet woodland. Some other birds that we have had on site, shrike. I saw a shrike many years ago now. I think it was the Ashdown Forest accused us of pinching their shrike at the time. But it only visited for a bit. We gave it back. Wheatchat and wheatear we get occasionally. We've even had curlew. That was quite a surprise. Anybody recognise that one? Somebody rang in and said they'd seen one of these. We were a little bit sceptical to start with. Yeah, it's a honey buzzard. We think they're actually breeding in Erridge Park, which is across the road from the reserve. And they are seen occasionally. So that made the species seen on or flying over the reserve up to 94. But in 2018, we had a good time. These 4, hawfinch, sedge warbler, wood warbler, Adrian Podmore saw that, he's in here somewhere. And ring-ousel, we had a couple of ring-ousel visiting. And so since 2007, 107 species of birds seen on the reserve. Even had white-tailed eagle flew over. We're counting that one. And there's the short-eared owl that I saw in October. Not just me, there were other people there. But we do a common bird census in the woodland and the heathland, so across the whole site. And in 2021 there were 49 bird species breeding and 776 territories. These boxes are often spotted around the reserve. People think they're bird boxes. Then they have been known to turn them round They think we put them the wrong way around, and the hole should be at the front, not the back. But they're not. This is classic evidence of a dormouse. And the hole in the back is that the dormouse goes up the tree and in the back of the hole. I'm one of the monitors here at Broadwater, and I also monitor 2 of our other reserves. Adrian, who's here, he trained me to be a license holder. And there we are. Did anybody go up? The only time you go to an event where someone puts a photo up of a dormouse and someone doesn't go, is the National Dormouse Conference. They put them up and everyone says, oh yeah, another one of those. Quite a few, there's a couple there. We've been monitoring now for, since 2010, is it, Adrian? No. Yeah, 2010. There's Adrian there. My wife Linda doing the notes. It's not all a good story, however. Numbers are falling quite rapidly. As you may know, in the years between 2000 and 2022, dormouse population in the UK dropped by 70%. The population of Broadwater is sort of mirroring that, I'm afraid. One of the reasons for that, 5 minutes, yep, is deer, I'm afraid. This is deer fencing, as you can see in the coppice. There's inside and outside, you can see the difference. And the fencing was put up with funding from SOS. We're hoping that will make a difference. We're also shooting deer now at Broadwater to try and reduce the impact. Butterflies on the site are being monitored regularly. We're talking about that with the UK butterfly conservation guys over there. Brimstone, bottom right-hand corner, a common butterfly. We've got quite a lot of its food plot, the alder butterfly. We get the occasional white admiral, silver wash fritillaries at the right time of year, and we also have occasionally the dark green fritillary. Now, this is a success story. We have recorded 28 species of dragonfly at Broadwater. That's up with some of the best sites in Britain. You've got beautiful demoiselle, the golden winged, which is probably the biggest, I think it's the biggest UK dragonfly. Large red, Asia blue. And this one, less common, this is the black darter, heathland, acidic heathland specialist. And this one, our most recent newbie, that's a Norfolk Hawker. They were confined to the Broads, but they moved south, so Norfolk Hawkers are around this part of the world. If you don't like spiders, don't look. That's a wasp spider. You see them on the heath. You get plenty of ants. Reptiles, we get these 4. It's a slow worm, grass snake, the common lizard and adder. One of the things we do get at Broadwater are these amazing animals. These are the black adders. Really spectacular animals. Great photo of an adder by one of our visitors. I thought we got very close to that one. Grass snake. Slow one. This one's had a happy event. You see at the bottom? A little one. Botany is rather good. I mean, there's plenty of bluebells in the woods. Nice flowers. And now get 4 types of orchid. For some reason, big orchid has started to appear at Broadwater. No one quite why, because they're a chalkman specialist, I understand. But we do get them. And there are some nice fungi, turkey tail. This one, the green elf cup, which is, if you find a bit of wood, dead wood in Broadwater, and it's got green all the way through it, hasn't been painted. It's a fungi. That's chicken of the woods. Somebody says that's nice to eat. Anybody eaten that? Okay. When it goes a bit manky, it doesn't look very nice at all, does it? Kind of a bit like sick of the woods, I think. And violet webcap is I think the fungi that wasn't very common, becoming more common nowadays. Rather nice reserve, so I hope you'll come and visit if you haven't already. Thanks very much for listening.
Fantastic. Chance for one or two very quick questions before we conclude. Anybody got any questions about that? I'll go to the back, yes.
You showed us grazing by goats and horses. Is there any scope for grazing by cattle?
Any scope for grazing by cattle?
Yes, but it means more infrastructure, cattle handling pens and that kind of thing. It'd be pretty expensive. We've got goats, we have had sheep. Goats and sheep and our ponies are perhaps a bit easier to manage. It's a question of expense. We would like, I think the staff would like to have cattle if we can find the money to get cattle handling facilities in.
And one final question. Carol.
Okay. Alan, like you, I was in the early stages of Broadwater, and I always hoped that Red Start would come. What has anything happened?
Have red starts come?
Yeah, I should have said that. I should have mentioned Red Star. They are seen occasionally, mainly on moving through. But one of our volunteers went down to Old Lodge a year ago or two and had a look at all their boxes there. Had a chat to the guys who made them, and he's made about a dozen Red Star boxes. And we're starting to monitor them this year. So maybe. Yeah.
Brilliant. I know many of you need to get your to the trains and get on your way, so we'll end it there. But I hope that's inspired many people to go and see Broadwater Warren, see what's been achieved. I think that given that it only started in 2010, what's been done in 30 years is incredible, and it's another positive story to take away from today. Alan, thank you so much. So all that's left is to hand over